Have you ever noticed how some people can shift the entire energy of a room without raising their voice, without demanding anything, and without lifting a single emotional finger? They don't beg. They don't chase. They simply choose silence. They choose absence. And suddenly, everything changes. People notice. People shift. People start wondering. That's not magic. That's power. Quiet, grounded power. We live in a world that celebrates noise, where being responsive, loud, and constantly present is confused with being strong. But real strength often looks like the opposite. It looks like restraint. It looks like knowing when to step back, when to stop talking, when to stop explaining yourself to people who are never really listening. The moment you choose not to react, not to play into old games, not to be emotionally available for everyone at all times, something remarkable happens. The dynamic shifts, and people who once controlled you through your reactions start to lose their grip. Why? Because your predictability gave them power. Most of us don't realize how much we're being emotionally manipulated simply because we're always there, always responding, always justifying, always saying yes when everything inside of us is screaming no. But when you stop, when you pause, when you let silence speak instead of your usual reaction, you disrupt that entire system. People don't know how to handle someone who doesn't play by the script. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." Now pause and really think about that. When you withdraw and someone starts poking, provoking, trying to get a rise out of you, what does that say about them? More importantly, what does it say about your place in their lives? Chances are they're not reacting to you. They're reacting to the fact that you become unpredictable, unavailable, uncontrollable. That's terrifying for people who thrived off your emotional generosity. And here's the truth no one talks about. Most of us are tired, not because life is too much, but because we're too available for the wrong people. We give our energy like it's unlimited. We answer calls we don't want to. We respond to texts when we're exhausted. We show up when we really need to rest. Every small compromise chips away at us. And at the end of the day, all we're left with is frustration, a strange emptiness, and the haunting feeling that something isn't right. It's not just about saying no. It's about knowing when your silence is more powerful than any explanation. It's about recognizing that emotional unavailability, when chosen from a place of self-respect, not avoidance, isn't coldness. It's clarity. It's strength. So ask yourself this. How often are you giving away parts of yourself just to be accepted? How often are you making yourself small, silent, or overly agreeable just to keep the peace? The moment you realize that your constant availability is not love, it's self-abandonment, that's the moment everything begins to change. This first step is not about turning your back on the world. It's about turning toward yourself, choosing your peace over chaos, your energy over obligation, your truth over comfort. And trust me, the moment you do that, the entire game changes. The power of choosing silence. There is a quiet power in silence that few people ever truly discover. We live in a world that rewards noise, quick replies, constant explanations, instant validation. We're taught from an early age that being responsive, agreeable, and emotionally present makes us good, likable, worthy. And so without realizing it, we stretch ourselves thin, constantly reacting to every question, every message, every crisis that isn't even ours. But what if the greatest strength you could develop isn't in how loud you speak or how quickly you respond, but in how wisely you choose your silence? Choosing silence isn't about shutting down or giving up. It's not passive. It's not cold. It's not cruel. It's presence in its most concentrated form. It's what happens when you stop scattering your energy everywhere and begin holding it close, valuing it, protecting it. Because every time you react without thought, explain without being asked, or justify your existence to someone who doesn't even deserve your presence, you're leaking energy. You're giving away your peace. And over time, this energy loss leaves behind a heavy kind of fatigue, the kind that seeps into your soul and makes life feel endlessly noisy, even in moments of quiet. Think about it. How many times have you felt the need to explain why you didn't answer a message right away, or felt anxious because you didn't have the strength to be there for someone else's emotional drama? How many times have you forced a yes when everything in you is begging for a no? That's not just stress. That's your energy being siphoned off by patterns you've never questioned. It's your instinct to people please, to keep the peace, to be the good one, even when it comes at the cost of your own well-being. Carl Jung believed that everything we feel, every reaction, every irritation, every impulse, is a mirror, a reflection of something within us. So when we feel compelled to respond immediately, to not leave anyone waiting, to constantly be available, it isn't just politeness. It's fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of rejection. Fear that if we don't show up instantly, we'll be left behind or seen as selfish. But who told you that being whole within yourself is selfish? Who made you believe that your silence is something you owe an explanation for? The truth is, silence unsettles people, especially those who have grown comfortable controlling you through your reactions. When you don't respond, when you choose not to explain, when you remain still instead of getting pulled into emotional turbulence, it disrupts the game. The power dynamic shifts. Suddenly, they're not in control anymore. And that's uncomfortable. But discomfort is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to yourself, to your peace, your energy, your healing. Let's be honest. Some people don't love you. They love how accessible you are. They love the emotional relief you provide. They love the role you play in their life, not the person you truly are. And when you change, when you stop performing that role, they say you've changed. They call you distant, cold, strange. But you're not any of those things. You're simply returning to yourself. You're no longer offering your energy freely to those who never truly valued it. You're reclaiming what was always yours. And in that reclamation, something sacred happens. You begin to feel your center again. You start to notice your own thoughts more clearly, your own desires more truthfully. You realize how much of your life has been spent responding to everyone else's needs, moods, and projections, and how little space you've given to your own inner voice. That voice, once muffled by noise and obligation, now begins to speak louder in your silence. It tells you what feels right, what feels wrong, who feels heavy, who feels light, and slowly you begin to trust it. You don't have to announce your boundaries. You don't have to explain your silence. You don't need to justify your distance. All you need is the courage to hold it, to stay with it, to let it do its work, not to hurt others, but to heal yourself. Because silence, when chosen consciously, becomes a sanctuary, a place where your soul can breathe again, a space where clarity returns, where your energy gathers, where your strength is rebuilt not from noise, but from stillness. So if you've been feeling tired of being everything for everyone, tired of explaining, tired of reacting, then maybe what you need isn't more effort. Maybe it's less. Maybe you need to say less, respond less, engage less. Not because you don't care, but because you finally care enough about yourself to stop leaking your essence into people and places that drain you. Silence is not the absence of love. It's the presence of discernment. It's the boundary between what serves you and what steals from you. And the moment you begin choosing it, not out of fear, but out of wisdom, you begin to understand something deeply profound. You were never meant to be available to everyone. You were meant to be whole, even in your absence, powerful, even in your quiet, and respected, even in your mystery. This is the beginning of that power. Not a loud declaration, but quiet decision. I will no longer waste my energy on what does not feed my soul. I will protect my peace, and I will choose silence, not as retreat, but as rebirth. And in this silence, I will meet myself again. Protecting your peace is a revolutionary act. There comes a moment when you wake up and realize you're not tired because you've been doing too much. You're tired because you've been doing too much for the wrong people. You've been extending grace where there's been no growth. You've been offering love where there's only been convenience. You've been fighting for connections that should have never made it past the first red flag. And that kind of exhaustion, it's not physical, it's spiritual. It's the kind of tired that settles deep in your chest and slowly chips away at your sense of self until one day, you barely recognize the person in the mirror. That's when you know it's time to protect your peace, no matter what it costs. Protecting your peace isn't some soft, passive concept. It's not just about lighting candles, doing breath work, or going off-grid for the weekend. It's about making hard decisions. It's about choosing distance when your soul is being suffocated. It's about saying no when your people-pleasing patterns are screaming yes. It's about unfollowing, unplugging, detaching, because you're angry or bitter, but because you're finally choosing yourself. And here's the truth they won't tell you. When you stop making yourself endlessly available, people will call you selfish. But it's not selfish to stop bleeding for people who wouldn't even hand you a bandage. You'll notice it first in subtle ways. The conversations that once drained you suddenly feel unbearable. The friendships that used to mean everything now feel one-sided and hollow. The drama, the chaos, the emotional roller coasters. They no longer thrill you, they exhaust you. And that's a shift. That's growth. When your nervous system starts rejecting what you used to normalize, it means you're healing. It means your body is finally screaming what your heart has whispered for years. This isn't peace, it's survival. And you weren't born just to survive. The thing is, many people are addicted to dysfunction. They confuse intensity with intimacy. They only feel alive in the highs and lows of toxic dynamics. So when you begin choosing peace, real, steady, soul-soothing peace, they'll tell you you've changed. And you have. You've stopped mistaking chaos for chemistry. You've stopped confusing anxiety for connection. You've stopped showing up where you're only tolerated, not valued. That's not weakness. That's power. That's reclaiming your worth. You don't need to fix people. You don't need to carry their pain. You don't need to dim your light so others can feel comfortable in the shadows. That's not love. That's martyrdom. And martyrdom is the slowest form of self-destruction. What you need is alignment. Relationships that don't drain you. Spaces that don't shrink you. Conversations that don't confuse you. You need to stop auditioning for roles in people's lives who haven't even decided if they value you. You are not a placeholder. You are not a backup plan. You are not an emotional dumping ground for people who only reach out when they're in crisis. The more you protect your peace, the more you'll feel the backlash. People will test your boundaries. They'll guilt trip you. They'll twist your silence into a weapon. But don't flinch. Don't fold. Every reaction is just evidence of how entitled they were to your energy. When someone loses access to the version of you that overextended, overexplained, and overgave, they don't miss you. They miss the control. And that's okay. Let them miss it. Let them wonder. Let them sit in the discomfort of your absence. Because here's what happens when you really begin to guard your peace. You get clearer. You start to hear your own voice again. Not the one shaped by fear or guilt or obligation, but your real voice. The one that's been buried under years of conditioning and codependency. You start choosing your own company, not because you're bitter, but because you're finally enough for yourself. You start noticing how much more beauty exists in simplicity. Quiet mornings, deep conversations, honest boundaries. Peace becomes addictive. Not the kind that numbs you, but the kind that revives you. You don't owe the world a version of you that's constantly performing, constantly pleasing, constantly proving your worth. You owe yourself a life that feels good on the inside, even if it doesn't always look impressive on the outside. Let them misunderstand you. Let them label you. Let them create stories in your silence. None of it matters. What matters is that your soul is no longer at war with your choices. What matters is that you can sleep at night knowing you're not betraying yourself just to be liked. Peace is the highest form of self-respect. And protecting it? That's not just healing, it's revolution. It's breaking the cycle. It's choosing a new legacy. One where you are no longer the sacrifice. One where you stop pouring into broken cups. One where you give yourself permission to walk away from anything that doesn't feel like peace. Because at the end of the day, protecting your peace isn't about building walls. It's about creating a life that doesn't require you to constantly recover from it. And that life, it's yours to claim. Quietly, powerfully, unapologetically. The loneliness that comes with healing. Healing is not the serene, aesthetic journey Instagram makes it out to be. It's not always soft mornings and yoga and glowing skin. Sometimes healing feels like waking up and realizing you don't relate to anyone around you anymore. It's the quiet ache of outgrowing spaces you once prayed to be part of. It's recognizing that the people who once felt like home are now strangers with memories. And perhaps the most jarring part? It's how healing often feels lonelier than the pain you were trying to escape. Nobody really tells you that healing requires isolation. Not because you don't want connection, but because the kind of connection you used to settle for doesn't feed you anymore. You start craving truth, depth, safety, reciprocity. And when those things aren't present, silence feels more nourishing than conversation. So you withdraw, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. You stop responding just to be polite. You stop showing up where your energy is drained. You stop faking laughter and participating in small talk that feels like spiritual starvation. It's not personal. It's just that the old version of you, the one who tolerated that surface level existence, doesn't live here anymore. You find yourself in this strange in-between. Not quite who you used to be. Not yet fully who you're becoming. And that space? It's lonely. It's the kind of lonely that creeps in late at night and sits on your chest. It's the kind that makes you question whether the growth is even worth it. Because when you're healing, you start to see things you can't unsee. Like how many of your relationships were built on trauma bonds, codependency, or shared pain rather than shared values. You start noticing how many people were only around because you played a version of yourself that fit their comfort zone. And once you stop performing that role, they disappear. Or worse, they make you feel like you're the problem. But you're not. You're just becoming whole. And wholeness scares people who only knew you fractured. There's a particular grief that comes with healing. It's not always about mourning the toxic relationships or the past you left behind. Sometimes it's about grieving who you were when you didn't know better. Because she was innocent, even in her dysfunction. She was doing the best she could with what she knew. And letting her go, even if she was hurting, feels like a betrayal. But it's not. It's a necessary shedding. You don't have to hate her. You just have to leave her behind. Because your future doesn't need the wounds she carried to survive. And still, despite the clarity, the peace, and the self-respect you're cultivating, the loneliness lingers. It's in the moments when you wish you had someone to call who truly sees you. It's in the longing to be understood without having to explain yourself. It's in the quiet spaces where love used to live. But here's the thing. This loneliness isn't empty. It's sacred. It's a sacred pause before alignment. It's a space where you build the foundation for real connection. The kind that doesn't require you to shrink, perform, or prove. And once you learn how to sit in that loneliness without rushing to fill it, you become powerful. Because now you're no longer chasing company out of desperation. You're waiting for resonance. Healing doesn't guarantee immediate joy. It guarantees honesty. And sometimes honesty is brutal. It strips away the illusions and leaves you bare. But in that bareness, you meet yourself. You begin to understand your triggers, your patterns, your worth. You stop begging for crumbs when you realize you are the feast. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the loneliness begins to shift. It softens. It turns into solitude. And solitude is where your spirit finally breathes. This part of healing is not glamorous. It doesn't come with applause. It won't be captured in perfectly lit photos. But it's where the real work happens. It's where you reclaim your voice, your standards, your vision. It's where you stop being available to pain disguised as love. And while it might feel like you're walking through this part alone, you're not. Every soul who's ever chosen growth over comfort, truth over illusion, and self-respect over acceptance has walked this path. You're in the company of the brave. So when the loneliness whispers that maybe you made a mistake, remind yourself. You didn't lose them, you found you. And no matter how quiet it feels right now, one day this silence will echo back with voices that feel like home, hearts that speak your language, and love that doesn't hurt to hold. But first you heal. Alone. Completely. Unapologetically. There's a strange kind of freedom that arrives the moment you stop trying to fix what keeps breaking you. It doesn't come with fireworks or grand declarations. It's quiet, almost anticlimactic. One day you just stop. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop chasing closure from those who were never capable of giving it. You stop trying to keep alive the relationships that only know how to bleed you dry. And in that stillness, you realize you were never hard to love. You were just trying to be loved by people who didn't know how to hold you. Letting go isn't a one-time event. It's 1,000 tiny decisions made in silence. It's biting your tongue when you want to reach out. It's deleting the message you almost sent. It's choosing your peace over their chaos, your future over your past, your growth over your comfort. It's learning how to sit in the ache of absence without trying to fill it with temporary distractions. It's grieving not just the person or the relationship, but the illusion you held onto for far too long, the fantasy of who they could have been, the dream of what you thought it might turn into, the hope that maybe this time it would be different. You mourn it all, and that morning, it's a sacred unraveling. It's a stripping away of everything you clung to in your most fragile moments. It's a painful recognition that no amount of effort can make someone meet you where they refuse to go. You finally understand that love, real love, doesn't need to be earned. It doesn't leave you begging. It doesn't force you to prove your worth. And once you see that truth, really see it, you can't unsee it. You can't keep fighting for a seat at tables where you were always meant to build your own. And here's where the freedom lives. Not in the absence of pain, but in the presence of clarity. You begin to reclaim all the energy you once gave away so easily. Your time, your attention, your softness. You stop pouring into hands that only knew how to take. You start noticing the beauty of your own solitude. You begin to hear your own voice again, no longer drowned out by the noise of pleasing, fixing, or proving. You learn how to enjoy your own company, not because you've given up on others, but because you finally come home to yourself. This freedom is not loud or boastful. It doesn't announce itself, but it's there. In the way your breath slows when you're not walking on emotional eggshells. In the way your heart stops leaping at every notification, hoping it's them. In the way you finally sleep through the night without replaying old conversations. This freedom feels like exhaling after years of holding your breath. And while it doesn't erase the memories, it does shift the power dynamic. Because now you're no longer controlled by them. You're no longer hoping for redemption in places that only ever offered you ruin. Letting go also makes room. Room for something real, something reciprocal. Something that doesn't require you to abandon yourself just to keep it alive. And until that kind of love comes, you stop settling. You stop performing. You stop molding yourself into versions you no longer recognize. Instead, you show up fully as you are, flawed, healing, whole. And that in itself is the most radical act of self-love. You may not realize it now, but letting go is how you make space for the life you were meant to live. It's how you shed the weight of all the versions of you that only existed to survive. It's how you choose alignment over attachment. And while the world may not celebrate this kind of quiet liberation, your soul will. It already is. Because you've stopped trying to keep what was never yours. And in doing so, you've given yourself back to yourself. That's freedom. That's peace. That's healing. There comes a moment, sometimes after heartbreak, sometimes after years of tolerating the bare minimum, when you stop waiting for someone else to see you, save you, or choose you. You wake up and realize that the most powerful, life-altering choice you can make is to finally choose yourself. Not in a half-hearted way, not in the way you used to whisper it to yourself after disappointment, but fully, fiercely, and without apology. It's not a loud rebellion. It's a soft revolution, a turning inward, a reclamation. Choosing yourself means you no longer beg for the kind of love you've always known you deserved. You stop shrinking to fit into someone else's comfort zone. You stop editing your emotions to avoid being too much or too sensitive. You stop apologizing for needing depth, honesty, presence. You start honoring your needs, your voice, your gut instincts, the ones you use to silence in the name of keeping the peace. You begin to recognize that peace without authenticity is just quiet suffering, and you're no longer willing to make that trade. This isn't about becoming cold or detached. In fact, it's the opposite. Choosing yourself makes you more connected to your truth, your boundaries, your worth. It softens you in all the right places and hardens you where you once let others walk freely without accountability. It doesn't mean you stop loving others. It just means you stop abandoning yourself in the process. You no longer stay just because it's familiar or because you hope your love might eventually be enough to change someone. You stop overgiving, over-explaining, overextending. You start listening to the version of you that has been whispering all along. You don't have to keep proving you're worthy of love. You already are. There's a strange discomfort that comes with putting yourself first, especially if you were raised or conditioned to believe that love means sacrifice and silence. You may feel guilt when you say no. You may feel selfish for choosing solitude over connection that drains you. But as you keep going, that guilt begins to fade, and in its place grows something sacred, self-respect. You begin to trust yourself again. After all those times you ignored your intuition, you learn that you don't have to wait for someone else to show up for you. You can show up for yourself. You can be your own safe place, your own soft landing, your own constant. This is not the glamorous kind of healing that gets posted online. It's messy. It's raw. Some days you'll doubt yourself. Some nights you'll still miss the comfort of what once was. But deep down you'll know. Missing something doesn't mean it was meant for you. Longing doesn't mean you have to return. You'll come to understand that choosing yourself isn't about isolation. It's about alignment. It's about choosing relationships that feel like home, not battlefields. It's about finding joy in your own presence before you invite someone else to share the space. It's about living a life that feels good on the inside, even if it doesn't always look perfect on the outside. And as time passes, you'll look back on the version of yourself that settled, that chased, that accepted less, and you'll thank them, not with shame, but with compassion, because they were doing the best they could with what they knew. But you know more now. You know that your value is not measured by someone's ability to see it. You know that loving yourself isn't a consolation prize. It's the foundation for everything else. And most importantly, you know that choosing yourself isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of the one you were always meant to write. Healing doesn't always look like peace. Healing is often romanticized as a serene journey, a peaceful unraveling of pain, a graceful path toward light. But the truth is, healing is rarely calm. It's chaotic, uncomfortable, confusing. It doesn't follow a straight line. It loops, spirals, doubles back, and sometimes breaks you open in places you thought were already healed. It's not always beautiful. Sometimes it's lonely. Sometimes it feels like you're getting worse before you get better. And still, you continue, because somewhere inside you, there's a quiet hope that refuses to let go. There are days when healing looks like crying in your car because the weight of everything suddenly feels too heavy. There are nights when you lie awake, replaying conversations, trying to figure out what you missed, where it all went wrong. There are moments when you feel angry at yourself for staying too long, or for leaving too soon. There's guilt for not being able to just move on, and shame for still caring when you promised yourself you were done. But all of that is part of the process. It doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're feeling. And that's where healing truly begins, in the raw, unfiltered truth of your emotions, not in pretending you've already outgrown them. Healing forces you to confront the parts of yourself you've tried to hide, the parts that were shaped by abandonment, by betrayal, by all the times you were told, through words or actions, that you weren't enough. You have to sit with the younger version of you, the one who kept accepting breadcrumbs and calling it love, the one who believed they had to earn care, affection, validation. And instead of pushing them away, you have to hold them. Tell them it's okay now. Tell them they don't have to chase love anymore. Tell them that what happened wasn't their fault, and that their pain deserves space to breathe, not to be silenced in the name of staying strong. You learn that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean erasing what hurt you. It means carrying it differently. It means remembering without reliving. It means no longer allowing the past to control your present. There's power in that subtle, quiet power. The kind that builds slowly, like trust. The kind that doesn't need to be loud to be real. One day, you'll catch yourself smiling at something simple. A morning coffee, a sunset, a moment of stillness that doesn't ache. And you'll realize you didn't have to force that moment. It came naturally. That's healing too. Some people won't understand your process. They'll expect you to be over it by now. They'll say you're being too sensitive, too emotional, too dramatic. Let them talk. Let them misunderstand. This journey is yours, not theirs. You don't owe anyone a timeline. You don't have to package your healing in a way that's easy for others to digest. The truth is, healing is sacred. It happens in the quiet spaces where no one is watching, in the courage it takes to keep showing up for yourself, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And eventually you'll feel that shift. It won't be dramatic. You won't wake up suddenly healed. But little by little, you'll notice the tightness in your chest loosen. The tears come less frequently. The memories sting less sharply. You'll stop blaming yourself. You'll stop needing closure from people who were never capable of giving it. You'll start building a life that feels good to live, not one that looks good on the outside but hurts in silence. And that's when you'll know you're not just surviving anymore. You're healing. For real this time. Not perfectly, not completely, but deeply, honestly, and in your own way.